I never wanted a sister growing up, despite only having 2 annoying little brothers. I didn't want one because I had my best friend, Mariana. We are even closer than sisters, and sometimes it feels like we're actually related because our dads have been best friends since high school. We've always had each other. She's the only one I can trust with my thoughts and feelings. Until I had to hide something from her, and we almost fell apart. Hi there! Remember to like this video or subscribe to our channel if you really like this insane story. It really helps us out. Mariana always walked me home from school. My parents asked why, because she lived at least 20 minutes away from us, and after a long day of school, it was pretty tiring. We always told them it was just to spend time together, but it was for a reason I could never bring myself to reveal. Our neighbor. Since I was around 12, we had this neighbor named Rick. Imagine the creepiest guy you can, with yellow teeth and a greasy shirt. That's Rick. He gave me a weird feeling, which I trusted to mean he was up to no good. One day I decided to wash my car. I took a bucket and a sponge and distracted my brothers with a video game. I was certain I had seen Rick leave. He was probably in the city doing some shady stuff. I heard a familiar cough. Rick always seemed to have gunk in the back of his throat. I jumped, not expecting him. I went to the other side of the car so I could see him, even if I didn't directly look at him. I avoided making eye contact in fear that he'd do something weird. It had been like 10 minutes and I was still soaping up the side of my car that faced our house because I dreaded turning my back to Rick. I was getting sick of limiting myself because I was afraid. So I went to the other side. I heard slow footsteps in the gravel behind me. Maybe it was a cat? I didn't think Rick would be brave enough to actually come towards me. Suddenly, I felt a rough hand grab my arm and try to spin me around, but it let go just as quickly and I saw 2 fingers fall to the ground. When I recovered from the shock, I realized someone had tackled Rick, who did, in fact, come up to me. The tackler was familiar. He landed a punch in Rick's dumbfounded face. My neighbor crawled away and quickly went back into hiding in his dilapidated house. My rescuer turned around, and that's when I recognized him. Jeremy? I asked in disbelief, to which he gave me a huge grin before picking me up and swinging me around in a hug.
Angelica!
He exclaimed. I was surprised to see him beaming at me with the brightest smile. I hadn't seen my best friend's twin brother in almost 3 years. Last time I saw him, he must have been a foot shorter than he was now, and he was always glued to his phone or acting up in some way. The guy in front of me was much taller and energetic. He had also built some muscle. They made you work hard at that boarding school, huh? I asked him, to which he smiled and gave a twirl so I could get a 360 of his transformation.
My mom and pops told me to come say hi,
he said, so I motioned for him to come in, but then he grabbed my hand. I felt a tingly feeling when he did. He looked concerned now.
What's up with your neighbor? He looked like he wanted to eat you, so I guessed he was up to no good,
said Jeremy. I told him briefly that my neighbor was a creep and thanked him for coming when he did. It was my fault. I should have been looking behind me. I shrugged, but Jeremy shook his head violently and said,
It's not your fault for not expecting to be grabbed on your own front lawn. It's his fault, and his alone.
I felt pretty awkward, so I playfully punched him on the arm and told him to come and say hi to my parents and brothers. I was over at Mariana's house one day, but it felt different. I was flustered because we were playing cards on the kitchen island, but her brother Jeremy kept walking in and out. I found him pretty distracting. I couldn't help staring a little. He had grown up so much and his personality also felt completely different. Suddenly, I had butterflies in my stomach whenever he was near, and I could feel my heartbeat in my face when he hugged me to say hello or goodbye. So, how does it feel to have your brother back? I asked Mariana. She smiled and said there was a part of her missing when her twin wasn't around. He's pretty cute now, I said shyly, testing the waters to see her reaction. It was worse than I expected. She dropped the cup she was holding, which was thankfully plastic, and not glass. She spilled orange juice all over the cards, and we both pushed our stools backwards. You can't be into my brother. You're like a sister to me, said Mariana through gritted teeth as she cleaned up the orange juice. I'm not. I was just saying. I defended myself. I was disappointed. Part of me hoped she'd be the kind to want me to like her brother, but I also knew she wasn't like that. I absolutely forbid you to date my brother. That would be so messed up, she said. She made me promise I wouldn't go out with Jeremy and that I wouldn't make a move. I promised, But sneaking glances at each other doesn't count as making a move, right? That night, I begged Mariana to drive me home because I had walked to her place and it was nighttime, meaning I wouldn't be able to see if Rick was watching me. She fell asleep after we watched a movie and I didn't want to wake her up. So I tiptoed out of her room. I was halfway down the stairs when I ran into Jeremy.
You're leaving?
He asked in a hushed voice. The house was super quiet and dark. I guess everyone was asleep. Yeah, Mariana fell asleep, so I'm just gonna walk home, I whispered back. His brows furrowed and he said,
No way, I'm letting you do that, knowing you live next to a creep.
He grabbed his jacket and walked to my house. I hadn't brought a jacket, so I got chilly pretty quick. He noticed I was shivering slightly and gave me his jacket, but he also threw an arm over my shoulders. Suddenly, I could feel my heartbeat in my face and I felt really warm. After talking and walking for a while, we were at my doorstep. I fumbled with the keys because I didn't really want him to leave. He put a finger under my chin and lifted my face so our eyes met. That made me dizzy for a second. I leaned in, expecting him to kiss me, and then he kissed me on the cheek. I was visually disappointed, which made him chuckle.
I'll see you around,
Jeremy said. Then he started walking back home, and I found myself staring in the direction he had gone. I was up all night thinking about him. How was he suddenly so perfect? One of the reasons Mariana and I became so close was because we both hated the stupid traditions our dads have. Every year, they drag us all out to a remote campsite in the mountains. Mariana and I, we both love the city, but we hate the outdoors. It's full of bugs everywhere you look. And why would you sleep in a bag made of a loud material when you could stay at home and sleep in a super comfy bed? The dreaded beginning of the camping trip had arrived, and I was packing my stuff into a duffel bag. From my window, I saw Rick looking at my dad, who was putting our stuff in the trunk of his car. I didn't think anything of it, but then he walked up to my dad, and they started chatting. If there's one thing my dad loves talking about, it's camping. So naturally, he just started talking enthusiastically. I went down to the car to put my bag in the trunk and eavesdrop on the conversation. My dad was telling Rick exactly where we were going, which I didn't appreciate. I appreciated it less when I snuck a glance at them and immediately made eye contact with Rick, who winked at me. I felt sick to my stomach, so I went back inside to grab a bite to eat. I was scared. What if he went to the mountains and did something to me or to us? After that day when I washed my car, I was scared he was becoming more bold. I hated the camping trip so much that I will spare you all of the unpleasant details. The only thing you need to know is how the trip ended. I had woken up one night because there was a rustling outside my tent. A hand grabbed mine and yanked me out. It was Jeremy. He told me to be quiet and pulled me into the forest. My heart was beating out of my chest, but it skipped a beat when I saw what he had done. In a stunning clearing, he had set up a midnight picnic for us. We ate and talked for what felt like hours, and eventually, we kissed. As soon as we did, though, Jeremy was yanked away from me. I saw a blur, but it was definitely my dad keeping Jeremy pinned to the ground. There was another blur, and suddenly my dad and Jeremy were fighting each other on the grass. They woke everyone up, from Mariana to my little brothers. Everyone watched as they yelled at each other. The night ended with Mariana and me not speaking, and all of us heading back home in the middle of the night. I was so embarrassed, but I knew I at least had Jeremy. Now that everyone forbade Jeremy and me from dating, we wanted it even more. We started seeing each other in secret. He would come over when I was home alone or vice versa. When I went over to his place, though, he would pick me up because Rick had gotten even creepier. He started dressing like Jeremy. Can you believe that? I was so freaked out. I hated seeing him. Jeremy would wait for me to finish clubs after school so we could at least hang out on the way home. One of those days, he was sitting in the bleachers while I played dodgeball. He was distracting me so I couldn't see a dodgeball flying full force at my neck. I had been hit before, but it never hurt as bad as in that moment. I felt like I had been stabbed. I was in so much pain I couldn't stand up or move my neck. Coach was afraid the hit messed up my spine, so they rushed me to the emergency room. It was all a daze. One second I was getting x-rayed, the next they were putting me on anesthesia and getting me ready for surgery. I was so scared, but seeing Jeremy next to me every step of the way helped. He looked just as worried, if not more. Surgery took around 2 hours, I was told. They had extracted something from my neck that was to blame for the unbearable pain I was in. It was a little metal thing. I asked what it was when my doctor came in to check on me.
It sounds odd, but we're certain it's a microphone.
He said. Odd was an understatement. How the hell did a microphone end up in my neck? Of course, I spent the next few days tossing and turning, wondering how it happened. I had to stay in the hospital for a while because recovery from neck surgery is complicated. Jeremy was by my side often, but he was acting strange. I think my neighbor could have something to do with it, I told him. I didn't know how, but I guessed Rick put that in my neck for some deeply disturbed reason. Jeremy went to go get snacks one day and left his phone behind unlocked. He always did that, but I never snooped because I trusted him. It was different this time. I had been looking at the tiny microphone for ages. The small logo etched into its side was imprinted in my memory. I recognized that same logo on Jeremy's phone. He had an app with the logo. I clicked on it. My heart beat in my throat. And what I found shattered me. It was thousands of voice recordings, all of me, and all of them with strange sounds. Some were just me eating cereal, but others were Mariana and I talking about our perfect guys. There was some deeply personal stuff in there. I listened to a few seconds of random audio files and only felt sicker by the second. I needed to tell someone. Jeremy had completely manipulated me from the start. He clearly listened to me talking about my type and what I wanted for ages. So that's what he became. It's crazy to think how a crazy twin brought me back together with my best friend. Mariana and I hadn't talked for over a week. Completely unprecedented, but being the fantastic friend that she is, she was there when I needed her most. She listened to every word I said and didn't doubt me for a second. It was easier to tell our parents when she was by my side, squeezing my hand. This incident also ended the feud between our dads. They were best friends again. You're probably wondering, what happened to Jeremy? They thought he could be trusted to be a normal member of society, but he clearly needed help. Mariana's parents decided it would be best if they sent him back to the boarding school he was at before.
You belong to me. I will get you back.
He screamed at me as they dragged him away towards the shuttle that would take him to school. I trusted and still trust that if he ever does try to get me back, my family, biological or not, will always have my back.